Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Cyrus and this is Tuntum Network from Accra, Ghana. Be kind to subscribe and click on the bell if today is your first time with us. Let's jump right into it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there is an unfortunate silent conflict going on in West Africa that needs to be discussed, ladies and gentlemen. This is about the Economic Community of West African States, which is ECOWAS, and the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. I describe this as unfortunate because this is a situation of two groups of countries with a common enemy who should know better. However, the older group is deliberately and unfortunately more concerned about the stance of the younger group way more than focusing on the activities of their shared enemy. Ladies and gentlemen, ECOWAS is the father, AES is the prodigal son, and terrorism plus imperialism are their enemies, their shared enemies. The father is 50 and the son is 2 years old, and here is how they differ. ECOWAS is about economic and political union, whereas the AES is strictly about military defense alliance. So their priorities aren't the same by definition. ECOWAS is against coups, and the AES is a product of coups. Ladies and gentlemen, what actually differentiates these two groups is a matter of their partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, ECOWAS has partners and sponsors who are the EU, the UN, and France. Whereas the AES abhors these partners and rather sides with their rival, Russia. This is the fundamental reason ECOWAS and its partners wants to do anything possible to disband this group, including setting the stage for these three presidents to be toppled. Ladies and gentlemen, they could have been lenient or easy on them if their alliance was neutral or with another Western country. But with Russia, that is a threat to their investment, their activities, and their overall plans for the region. Ladies and gentlemen, ECOWAS, as I've read and understand over the years, isn't what I thought it was. ECOWAS appears to be interested in democracy, as it were. But when it comes down to it, ladies and gentlemen, they are only interested in the outer system of democracy, but not the practice of democracy, as in what the people want. Let me explain, ladies and gentlemen. The leadership of the Sahel region clearly have the support of their people, even though their entry wasn't the preferred choice. The people actually like how things are being run and how things have turned out to be. But you see, ECOWAS isn't happy with that. And here is why. The idea of having a military president as a neighbor is not always a convenient feeling for these guys. There arises this fear of the unexpected crossing borders into other countries, ladies and gentlemen. This therefore becomes a reason to be on a constant alert. And if you remember, ladies and gentlemen, Ghana's former president, having had this feeling, was seen in a video reporting Burkina Faso's military leadership to the USA.
Today, Russian mercenaries are on our northern border. Burkina Faso has now entered into an arrangement to go along with Mali in employing the Wagner forces there. I believe a mine in southern Burkina has been allocated to them as a form of payment for their services. Prime Minister of Burkina Faso in the last 10 days has been in Moscow. And to have them operating on our northern border is particularly distressing for us in Ghana. Apart from not accepting the idea of great powers once again making Africa their theater of operation, we have a particular position that you know about over the Ukraine war.
That is the fear I'm talking about. What the video showed us was about Ghana's former president only. What we don't see is how often other heads of state in Africa reports the AES to their partners in the West. Ladies and gentlemen, for this fair reason, ECOWAS is equally as interested in doing whatever it will take to force these countries back into constitutional rule without any regards to the decision of their people. This is where the irony lies, ladies and gentlemen. If democracy is of the people, for the people, and by the people, then shouldn't the people's choice matter in what happens with leadership in their country? So I say ECOWAS isn't about the practice of democracy in West Africa, because it's not about the people's choices, but it's about having a civilian president as a neighbor whose actions will be predictable, ladies and gentlemen. This is therefore what I suspect are the core reasons for pushing for democratic constitutional rule in the Sahel region. Number one is to eradicate the fear of experiencing the actions of these three soldier presidents, which can spill over to other African countries. They fear the army of other African countries may want to look at that and act similarly in their individual countries. Secondly, I suspect the Western partners of ECOWAS are insisting that ECOWAS forces the AES back into the fold. This will help restore access to civil conversations and negotiations over their interest in these countries, ladies and gentlemen. Because so long as the military leadership rule as president of the AES, there cannot be any meaningful negotiations that can be binding and sustainable in the long term. So that's my opinion. African leaders in the ECOWAS don't want to be looking over their shoulders for fear of a spillover into their countries. And their Western partners wants a civilian government to protect their interests in the sub-region. Now, having said this, ladies and gentlemen, let no one fool you, for ECOWAS is only a charade. And I say it with all facts. It is only a tool for a collective control in Africa, just as AU has become. Explain this to me. How can you have a meeting of ECOWAS leaders? Listen to this. How can you have a meeting of ECOWAS leaders and at the meeting provide seating for international observers and donors? Is that a meeting for African solutions or a sponsored meeting under supervision? Help me make sense of that. That's definitely a meeting with leaders who come to the table pre-informed to do the bidding of their foreign friends that are funding them privately. Let's not kid ourselves anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Ghana is in bed with the USA. Nigeria is with France and the UK. And Ivory Coast is an extension of France in Africa, like I always say. And these three are the strongest in ECOWAS in terms of population and GDP. So exactly what are you to expect out of such meetings, ladies and gentlemen? Remember, President Ahmed Tinubu of Nigeria was the chairman of ECOWAS since the AES broke away in 2023. And Nigeria is the biggest. From July of 2023 to June of 2025, he was the chairman and tried all manner of tactics to coerce the AES into the community, but failed. He tried with sanctions and failed. There was the economic, financial, and travel sanctions, which failed, and the full economic and border sanctions, which also failed in 2024. Now we have President Julius Maada Bio of Sierra Leone taking over as the new chairman of ECOWAS, which happened in June of this year in Abuja. Ladies and gentlemen, will he go on the same road as Tinubu to try and whip the three leaders in line, or allow the AES to be? But ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, his assignment will not even be up to ECOWAS to decide, but to the donors and partners. What ECOWAS heads must understand is this: the support the AES has garnered goes beyond the three countries, ladies and gentlemen. It goes even beyond Africa. Unlike before, when the narrative could have been controlled, now the floodgates are open to all. The support is global, and if care is not taken, could spark a continental uprising should there be an assassination. Most of the heads of states in Africa don't know how much their people want to kick them out of power. They are very ignorant of the hate many of their people have towards them. And a move like this could be all the people will need to spark that uproar, ladies and gentlemen. Presidents like Ouattara of the Ivory Coast and Faure Gnassingbé of Togo have no moral rights to raise an objection against the AES. None. Zero. Nada. President Adama Barrow of the Gambia should mind his business with the challenges in his country, ladies and gentlemen. There is a lot of reforms post Yahya Jammeh that needs to be implemented. That hasn't been done yet. He should focus on that. President of Guinea and Guinea-Bissau should focus on their coming elections. President of Guinea, an army colonel, who yourself is a transition leader who seized power in 2021, and the President Sissoko of Guinea-Bissau, who won elections in 2019. In yourself, you are an army general and therefore have a lot on your plates. So they shouldn't even bother with this. This is a struggle for the destiny of the Sahel state. It's not your fight to fight. Take care of your internal affairs first. With all that said, ladies and gentlemen, when you observe West Africa carefully, it will take countries like Ghana and Senegal to betray AES because the rest are already predictable. Ladies and gentlemen, let's stay focused and continue to support the Sahel states until they bring prosperity to their people, and we'll continue to speak the truth. God bless Africa, and thank you for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe and click on the bell for more of my videos. I'll come your way again very soon. Until then, it is bye-bye for now.